I think when you look at most embarrassing, work stories for me, and when you look at just my career, I started my career as a truck driver, so not not something super common, I think, with a lot of people with a job like mine today as a vice president of learning and development. And with being a truck driver, there's a lot of hustle and bustle and moving, and I remember, quite vividly, moving boxes in a Christian bookstore, and I bent over to pick up the boxes, and I heard a big rip, and I ripped my pants like from the top almost all the way down um to my ankle. Like I'd never seen pants rip like that. So, and if you've ever driven truck and worked for a company like FedEx or UPS, I think they've improved their pants quality a lot since then. But the material at that time was pretty much you were wearing cardboard as pants. Like they're very cheap, very brittle. And obviously, I'm in the middle of a Christian bookstore at a Christian college. And it was not a great moment. And neither was the moment where I had to call my boss and ask him to bring me another pair of pants as I sat in shame in the back of my truck in the middle of the summer. Yeah, it was not good. So I would say it was probably like I have a couple other not great moments in my career of just embarrassment as a corporate citizen. I would say that's probably the most public one, like walking out of a Christian bookstore in the middle of the day in an afternoon at a Christian school as a truck driver with your entire pants split from top to bottom was pretty miserable. And obviously people are going to class, so it wasn't like there was no one there. There was a lot of people there. It was the ultimate walk of shame. I don't know if I've ever recovered from it, honestly. I would say it converted me to being a shorts wearer. It didn't. I still wear pants. I just buy better quality pants at this point in my life. But yeah, I would say work story wise, that is by far, like when you talk about woe, that is a woeful, dark time in my career, and I hope to never relive it again. I don't bend over in many situations at work. I try to stay standing and I avoid picking things up, and I don't want people to judge me, but it's not worth the risk. I think it's not worth the risk.
Well, you'll get no judgment from me. Although I'm trying to envision, like in my head, there's a distinct sort of ripping cardboard sound that I'm imagining.
Oh, it
So it's
sounded just
just,
like you think. Yeah, it was very distinct. And I had a I'm very pasty white, so I turned very red, and uh, panic set in quickly. It was very quick. A lot of panic. A lot of panic.
and I'm assuming it's book, so it's not like you could like have a box behind you easily to cover
Nope.
your
Nope.
delicate
Nope.
bits. Yeah.
Yeah, it was not good. Not great.
If it makes you feel better, you are not the first ripped pants embarrassing story.
That's good.
So you're in good company.
Yeah. It's an elite group. I like to
Yeah.
think of us as an elite group of people. So uh, I'm glad to be a part of the club, and I hope to never join it again.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. Um, you made me cry. So that's a great way to start a recording. Hello and welcome, Josh. And I love that your sort of origin story is not typical by any stretch of the imagination. Like, I love that you have, you know, actually been a truck driver and actually worked your butt off, literally, in
Yeah.
that career before sort of turning towards learning and development. So I think we're going to have a fascinating conversation just because I think your perspective is super unique in this space. So let's start with a program or something you're extremely proud of in your career, like that big success that you've had that you'd like to share with us.
I think from a learning and development standpoint, quite a few things that I think I've left my thumbprint on, and I've felt really good about overall. But still to this day, I think one of the things I've been most proud of to be a part of was during my time at Verizon, where we built our wireless leadership academy, which was at that time way ahead of its its time. So, you're looking at a fully immersive learning program, gamification, AR and VR, every kind of learning modality you can think about, we put into that experience from bell to bell. And, I was fortunate enough to be a part of that. But, you know, two of the experiences that, I was really involved with creating was we built this amazing race style, journey for the customer experience. So what are our customers experience from the time they join us to potential churn moments, all the way to do we turn it around and keep them? Do we win them back? But that customer journey model is what the Amazing Race, was modeled after. And I got to build an iPad app that, linked to Bluetooth beacons all over a conference center. And those things had, these remote triggers, and we had different games from like the whole minute to win it thing was happening at that time. So you had the roadblocks were these minute to win it games. And it was just one of the most like fun, engaging, and then obviously hands-on learning experiences I've ever built. And then I also built out what we called Change Intelligence Agency, which was a change management leadership training. And we built out like CIA, like FBI gear, and people before you go in the room had like earpieces and sunglasses, and just the whole thing was immersive. And we were lucky enough to be able to measure the quality and impact of that entire program from, pre-behavioral to post-behavioral change, and then also metrics and impact. And we saw over a 300% ROI on that program. But, that in itself is a win, but just the simple fact that the company we worked for was so willing to, one, invest in learning, but two, like actually make learning fun and engaging and take the risk to do something else. So many companies are so stuffy and so in their own way of people won't like doing this or that. And it's just like, well, I don't think people go home and just like stare at the wall. Like, people have personality, people have fun in their life. And so we should find a way to make work fun in some way. Work's already tough enough. You have to make tough decisions. You have to, obviously, deal with budget constraints and people problems and the macroeconomic environment. So for me, like, that was the coolest part of that learning program, and one of the most fun, and probably when I think of cornerstones of my career, like, it was a complete game changer for how I viewed building learning experiences and changing behavior.
I would like to connect two dots that you mentioned that I think they're related. I think they're related. So one thing is basically to think about the experience of like the user, which is unique. I don't see it often in learning and development. Kind of like to do the UX of it. So just have a theme. I don't care what you learn. If you learn management or AI or communications or sales, think about how to make it fun, right? And to think about the user. Also, most people cannot hear us, but like you're wearing a sweatshirt with kind of like fun characters. I think it's also connected, but I want to connect it with, again, the fact that from your story that you started as a truck driver, right? And I think what Keren mentioned about this being unique is that when you come from the field and eventually you serve the field, you understand the field much better than to be kind of like from the ivory tower. Hey, I'm a learning and development professional. This is how you should learn management, right? So I wonder if you think they connect the 2 points. And I'm curious about how do you integrate that basic concept of the user experience, making it fun in basically everything you do, not only in this very successful program at Verizon, but even today.
Yeah, I focus on making things simple, fun, and relevant to the job. Like, if you just do those three things, you're going to make better learning experiences than most people. And I think the way I've connected my experience of being a truck driver, being a field service technician, installing cable, internet, satellite TV, and crawling in crawl spaces and having rats run out in front of my face and coming up into houses covered in cobwebs, is like work is already tough enough some days to where when I do training, it should be challenging. Like for sure, training should not be easy. And I think too many people make it easy. And you shouldn't be training at all if it's easy. But I need something that can still feel real, but doesn't feel like work. And so, there's times that training should feel like work, but they don't all have to feel that way. And I think coming from doing real work um, and being covered in dirt and being dirty at the end of the day versus sitting in an office like I do now in a 72-degree temperature all day, and you're not sweating, your back doesn't hurt, your hands aren't bleeding, your feet don't like it's just a completely different environment to where I know what I would have desired when I worked as a frontline worker and I'm being pulled into these trainings. I want something that challenges me but doesn't make me think I'm working. So like even though they're learning and changing behaviors, that's been my focus. And I think the way you do that is continue to talk to people in the front lines and ask them what they want. And that's what we do. We get feedback constantly to have that feedback loop. And then two, like you need to have those experiences. So, often in my line of work, many people, where they've gotten to where they are today, they started out in some internship program and they've never done anything but worked a desk job in their life. And so there is at some point that delta of being disconnected from the front lines, and what they need just continues to grow. And that doesn't, you know, that doesn't I don't want to like discourage people and say like, you're not talented or bringing something to the table, but, working in some job when you live at your parents' house versus working like I did, and it was your only source of income to live, and saying like, I know what it's like to do hard work, but you lived and worked for your dad's company. Those are insulting. That's an insulting thing to say to someone in the blue collar workforce. And I see it all the time from leaders when they're like, oh, I know, I used to work this summer job. It is not the same. And so it's just the mental capacity, how you live, how you view work, how you view the world is not the same as a teenager working at home doing landscaping in the summer versus someone literally doing landscaping as their full-time job and trying to figure out how to pay next week's bills. It's just fundamentally not the same thing. And so for me too, I think understanding how to put myself in the frontline worker's shoes has been a differentiator over my career, because I'm not the most educated person. I'm not the most talented person. I work very hard, but for me, it's just been being able to understand the need, like what is the actual need that people, that will allow people to better themselves, to better their mindset, to make their job easier, and then ultimately create these memorable experiences when they're not doing the work, right? When they're coming to a training. So that intersect has been very critical, for me and my career growth. And it's not something you can be taught. Like to me, like the only way I've been able to do it is like I've had to go work very tough jobs early in my career, and eventually getting to a desk job where I appreciate every moment of this. Like I appreciate how much easier, even though the jobs get harder, but fundamentally, like my back doesn't hurt at the end of the day. Like my hands have never been sore. I haven't come home one day working in a desk job covered in dirt from head to toe. It's just not the same. So my appreciation level for what people do that keep our company going is high. And I think that makes sure, like from my standpoint, like that makes sure that like when we create learning experiences, that they are fun. And I don't lose that kind of magic along the way. And that doesn't mean we don't swing and miss. Sometimes everyone swings and miss on training and development programs, but we do a darn good job of trying to continuously improve everything we do.
So how do you do that? If I don't have your background, and most learning and development professionals or HR professionals do not have your background, I understand talking to the frontline leaders, but like really, if now you need to based on your experience, give an advice on, let's say, I'm working for you. I'm a team member in your team, and I always had a desk job. Out of college, I started the junior learning development. I got promoted. Now I'm the director. I'm designing big programs. How do I bridge this gap? Because I didn't work in the field. I wasn't blue collar.
To me,
Or you send your people to do some cable
yeah,
installation.
yeah. To me, I think you do exactly that. Like if I didn't have the experience in something, I want to go immerse myself in it. And some companies do a really good job of quote unquote immersion, but a lot of them, like what they call immersion, is just like watching the work happen, right? It's like go to this place and watch the work happen. And yet again, like that's great. You're going to learn things, but if you do the work and really understand like how difficult it is to move shingles or to move boxes all day or to drive a large truck on a tight road in the snow, how stressful that, like when you're white knuckling it down a mountain, that's a different thing than, obviously sitting in the passenger seat or observing. So you don't need to go get your CDL or drive a truck necessarily, but I would say like work with, I think the individuals that work with their leaders to say, hey, I want to go and spend more purposeful time in the field and working shoulder to shoulder and like to really start understanding what they do and learn the processes. I think you'll get a lot more respect from the people in the field because you'll have a true appreciation for what they do. And it's not just lip service. And then I think on top of that, like you're going to learn something that you probably haven't learned in the past. And some of that's like how to think through the root cause of why things happen. Because like a lot of times people just think it's so easy to make this change and let's just do this because you're viewing the process as an outsider. But until you're doing it, until you're in the process, it's not going to click of like, oh, this is why we do it this way. And this is why we haven't changed or why we haven't been able to put technology in. It's not as simple as it seems. Like now I'm looking at it from a different angle. So I think, if you don't have that experience, figure out how you can go get a few weeks, not a few days, like a few weeks a year getting immersed into your business if you care about that business and want to work there long term. And if it wasn't a business like where I'm at today, like we have truck drivers, we have warehouse workers and forklifts and all stuff I've done. Like I've done construction and put on roofs, and those are the contractors we work for. I used to do general contracting with my brother and my stepfather. Like that was after I worked my full-time job. That's what we did on the weekends. Like that's where the rest of my income would come from. So, if you can't relate to that in some way, I just think you should go seek it. And a good leader is going to encourage that. They're going to say, you know what, you should. Like if you want to better impact our business, you need to know it more deeply than you do today, versus just like watching through the windows and window shopping.
And I would assume then the inverse is true, that what happens is when you have learning leaders who do that, they earn the respect of the frontline workers, which means that when they ask of them to do a training, they're more likely to agree to it. And I'm assuming as well, correct me if I'm wrong, that it also means that when you understand what the nature of their work is and you want to create that experience that is immersive and fun and engaging and all that, you're going to be able to get to that place much faster. And therefore they'll want to invest the time because that's time away from their work too.
Yeah. And you'll have people, I think the other thing when you know what it's like to truly work in the front lines and be in that environment, because I mean, there's days there's fist fights. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy stuff I mean, it's just depending on the company, it's a completely different world than what someone sitting in an office at a corporate location or whatever, working from home. It's not the same. And so I think when you look at that, like being in that environment and putting yourselves in their shoes, it also lets you know how to challenge people when they make excuses. Because there's a lot of excuses out there of why there's not enough this, there's not enough that. And I'm like, well, I did it. So I know there's enough time to read books and better yourself. And I dropped out of college the first time before I went back and finished. Like, I know when they're making the excuses, like I made the same excuses. I lived the life that they're talking about where I said there wasn't enough time and it's not as simple as you're saying. And a lot of it is just my mindset. But until you're around the mindsets and understand the mindsets of the people that are in your company, and it's going to look different depending on the company, whether it's a software company and you have a bunch of engineers, or a manufacturing company, a distribution company, whatever the company, retail, there's going to be different mindsets within your employees that unless you familiarize yourself like with them, then when there is pushback to change or cultural shifts or whatever, it just makes it that much harder to navigate. And so for me, that's, I think, has been the most important thing is when people challenge, like, I don't understand, it's like, well, I definitely do, like 100% do. Well, let's problem solve this because it's definitely something we can figure out. Um, the main thing limiting us in most of those circumstances is just the mindset. And it's hard. Like when you're only know one way of life and one way of work, like for me, for a long time, all I ever thought I was going to do is I just thought I was going to drive a truck, do the same route, every day, work 6 days a week, have 5 days off a year. Like that's literally for a long time. I just thought that's all I was going to do with my life. And, the mindset shift, that was me on my own. But we can be that for people within your company to create these really awesome careers for people in the front lines to go become the next Doug McMillan, who started in the front lines of a Walmart, like to be the CEO of the largest company on planet Earth. Like that's a really special story. And it could be a lot of people's story, but it starts with changes in your belief system. And so for me, I think that's probably the most critical thing when you're in that frontline role is just being able to challenge things and, call bull crap on things. I think it makes it a lot easier to navigate.
And then your role is to help promote a culture that promotes from within and supports the learning trajectory and isn't like, no, you're a truck driver, you're going to stay a truck driver. Let's just make sure you have like compliance, safety, and that your license is up to date, right?
Yeah. I mean, I want people to have life-changing experiences and grow in their career and make more money than they could ever dream of, and to lead things and think completely differently than they do today. Like I know it's possible because it happened for me. Now, what didn't happen for me is I wasn't offered those things at that point in my career. And so I think that's why we're working so hard, and it's not easy. It's not easy to get buy-in from leaders and buy-in from the business to invest in employees and their development. It continues to be a top thing that people want. It's not going away. And I think the more that you can do it and the more that you can, get the buy-in, like the more you can help like people change their lives and have these really awesome careers within their, within whatever company it is. And that's been the coolest thing is for me is just finding how can we do that and how can we create these mindset shifts and continue to like incrementally increase what we provide, to our employees. And, even today where I'm at now, we have not even scratched the surface. We have a long way to go. But I'll tell you, like every time we get better, we're serving and changing more people's like opportunity to have a really awesome career. And that's my focus. Like, how can I do things that allow other people to have an awesome career like I've been lucky enough to have, and completely change the trajectory of their life, their livelihood, all those things. I think it can be really cool, and but it is not easy. It is definitely culturally, every company I would say is the same, even though everyone thinks their company is different. No one ever thinks there's enough time. There's always something more important. Things always get pushed off. It's the same type of things, and you just have to keep bringing it back up and wear people down slowly, and you'll eventually get buy-in for things. And then if you do a good job of measuring things, you can get more traction. But it takes time. You're not going to change the culture in 6 months or a year. It's going to take 5 years, and you have to be patient along the way. And that part's probably the most difficult for most people in my space is having the discipline to know the fruits of your labor are not going to be seen for 5 years, most likely. So you just have to be patient and persistent.
So speaking of difficult, let's segue over to examples of maybe programs that didn't sort of miss the mark for you, or where you had the best of intentions but things didn't go exactly as planned. And then also, I think the lessons learned from it, because I'm sure the way you are now, the mentality that I'm sure has been years in the making, and you've gleaned your learnings from somewhere. So I'm curious to hear about the sort of less than ideal circumstances.
Yeah, I would say early on I screwed up a lot just because I thought I knew everything and what everyone wanted, and I didn't do a good job of asking employees and asking leaders and getting this like really cross collaborative view. And so, you know, it was at Verizon. Like I launched probably way too early a technical like we had this programmatic stuff called Tech University, and I was in charge of fundamentally reimagining it and redeploying the program. And I did not do a good job the first launch. So like, I overestimated how long things took, like, oh, it won't, things that take 3 months. I'm like, we can do it in one. And so I think that's the thing is like, I didn't have the learner needs dialed in. I didn't have all the right stakeholders dialed in. And then on top of that, because I, underestimated how long it takes to do some of the more ambitious things that we were doing. Like we built a digital escape room to where they could do like an escape room activity virtually versus like none of this stuff was stuff that like there was a playbook for. And I'm like, yeah, we can get it done in a month. And it's like, says who? Like, what are you talking about? And so it really like just didn't connect the dots or land well. Like it was so like the learning objectives were disconnected. The like even the experience and from like the videos and the narrative and just what behaviors we're trying to change were very disconnected. And so that was a big learning experience for me, just in general, of being more intentional of like, what are we doing? What is a realistic time? And let's start way longer than we think we actually need. And then if the business pushes back, then like we'll obviously find somewhere happy in the middle. But I was always giving way more aggressive timelines, and that really hurt. And so I had to go back. We had to go back to the drawing board, work back with stakeholders. We had to make a lot of adjustments, and it definitely improved the program. But I would say like the first iteration of that program was like world class. It was award winning and cutting edge, and we really tried to push the envelope. And it was definitely not as good as the first, even though it had way more shiny, fancy things than the first one. It was not as good as the first iteration of that program that won awards. And so I think that was another key thing for me, like with failing in that program, is knowing like, there's always some new fancy thing, technology that people want to use. And most of the time it's just so that they can say that they use this piece of technology and there's no intention behind it. And so for me now, I've just focused on like, let's be very intentional with like what we use, how we use it, to cut out the noise. And then that goes back into fundamentally how I think about learning programs with my people is like the whole keep it simple is let's not overcomplicate it. Let's keep it simple. Let's make it fun and like focus on the relevance to the job. And then once it lands really well through experimentation, then we'll scale to something else, right? Then we can start, once we really have it dialed in, we'll continuously improve and then add these other layers. And so I've just been more calculated through the years, but that first launch was pretty brutal. Not one of my proudest moments, and it was very humbling for me early on in my career. And luckily I learned that lesson before I became a leader, because when you're a leader and you have to eat dirt like that, it's pretty tough.
Amazing. So let's tie that back into skill development and the skills that you wish you had known to focus on when you were first starting out? I'm assuming part of it is that listening and figuring things out before you sort of jump, but I'd love to hear the skills you think that you should have focused on at the beginning of your career.
Yeah, I think for
And
me, when I look at skill development, just for once I kind of decided, hey, I want to be an executive someday. And, at first I had no idea. I didn't think that was possible yet again, as a person that didn't have a college degree. And really, I didn't know what my prospects were because everyone just told me like, you can't do this or can't do that. And that self-talk. But when I look at what probably held me back really early in my skill development was I didn't have high emotional intelligence. So I really struggled, and I still am improving in that area. Like I'm a very blunt, I'm a I come from a blue collar family, blue collar worker. Like the emotional intelligence thing for how I grew up and where I am as a human being is a never ending area of improvement, for me and how I have to approach work. So emotional intelligence for sure. I think problem solving and critical thinking is another area that early on, I've always been naturally good at, but yet again, I was just applying what I know versus becoming a continuous and lifelong learner, which I am now. I wasn't trying to learn all of the things outside of there to expand my scope, to have better problem solving and having better critical thinking. And so that's been critical, for me. Like at that point in my life, I was reading no books. I read like 30 books a year now. That has completely changed my ability to critically think and problem solve. And then I'd say probably the third area is just collaboration. My personality type is not a collaborative personality type. Like I was an athlete. I was a pitcher. The pitcher has the ball in their hand almost the entire time. There is no collaboration. When I played basketball as a point guard, like you're in control of the offense. So for me, that doesn't come naturally. And I was not a good collaborator early in my career. And that is, yet again, based on my personality, something I will have to work on forever. Like I'm never just going to be naturally gifted like some people, where the first thing they think about is collaboration. The first thing I think about is let's just get it done. And I'll do it if I have to, whatever it takes, right? Like I want to win at all costs. And so I have to pause that now even more as a leader and say, let me get the team involved, or let me get these people involved, and then let's figure out how to collaborate. So for me, those three areas were, if I would have had them earlier in my career, I would have probably accelerated even faster than I have today. But I would say, yeah, critical thinking, for sure, emotional intelligence and collaboration from a skills standpoint.
I love it. That's all I have. I want to thank you. This is so interesting, and I think you have such a unique perspective in this space. So I really want to say thank you for sharing it. And it's also, I feel like you should be doing a TED talk on like mentality, like mindset shift of like, just because you sort of grew up in one box or this is how you saw things, that doesn't mean that your trajectory should be, one way. You have the control, and if you have the right mindset, you can really push yourselves to go in any direction. And I love that like you're creating that for people now wherever you work.
Appreciate that.